The probability of a perpetrator of a severe sexual offence being foreign-born it's dominated by Muslim countries. It's very clear in the Muslim culture, the attitudes towards women, the fact that they expect women to veil themselves so as not to essentially be temptresses to men is a starting point.
This isn't a war we're democratically going to lose our country.
There's even TikTok videos that are made by the people traffickers to advertise their services to young men, saying, here are pictures of girls on a night out in Essex. Come to Britain.
Andrew Tate converted to Islam.
Wonder why he was so drawn to Islam. There's a phenomenon, isn't there, of the fat ginger convert.
Yeah, what is that?
So I've got a theory on this. I'm going to say something which will sort of attract guffaws of disgust from people who don't want to have their minds open to reality of what's happening.
61% of regular Heretics viewers haven't subscribed yet. Can I ask you a favour? If you love these fearless conversations, hit subscribe now because it's free, takes 2 seconds and powers our mission. Join hundreds of thousands of fellow heretics, subscribe, and let's question everything together. Alex Phillips, welcome to the show again. How you doing?
Great to be back.
Gosh.
Love coming on.
I know, and you're wearing the official Heretics jacket.
I know.
I just gave you.
We do look like we're going to some sort of Eton Garden party or something straight after this.
What a party!
Where's our Pimm's?
Where's our Pimm's? I wish.
I think it was our outfit that put me in mind for drinking Earl Grey, actually, because normally I would be more builder's tea, but considering we're dressed like toffs.
Other brands are available, in addition to Earl's Grey. Just does BBC do that, don't they? But there are other TV channels are available aside from the BBC. You made a brilliant documentary recently about a very serious topic that I found it very informative. With the New Culture Forum, this was, I believe.
Brilliant think tank.
They're brilliant. And some of the stats, let's start with some of the stats. I mean, they came from, and I don't want to put you on the spot because no one can remember stats.
No, I never can.
But roughly.
But they were all properly sourced. We made sure, actually. Oh, no, Matt Goodwin was the opening sort of gambit, wasn't it?
Where we talk about,
he's sort of done the survey to find out about media coverage. But in terms of where we're looking at statistics on crimes and the perpetrators of crimes by nationality, which is the main thrust, really, those were all sourced from governments, from, proper state-approved statistics.
What kinds of things were they showing us? Without, you don't have to know the exact numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it was very clear that in most Western European countries, so I'm thinking especially of places like the Netherlands, Germany, Scandinavia, and then latterly in the UK, where more statistics, since I made that documentary, are coming to light, you're looking at the probability of a perpetrator of a severe sexual offence being foreign-born is probably about 4 times higher than the native-born population. And then there are certain countries which are dominating the league tables, where league tables are published. And it's different in every country, I think, depending on the immigrant community. But the common denominator, when you look at the nationalities who are most likely to be committing sexual offences, it's dominated by Muslim countries.
So this is interesting to know because for a long time, I couldn't seem to get hold of those statistics. And people were saying to me, oh no, but what about all the white guys? And there are white guys.
White people raping and sexually assaulting.
Yeah, that's happening a lot. And then other people saying, no, but pro rata, it's much more people from, well, particularly British Pakistani sort of backgrounds. And then other people said, no, that's not the case. But is it now clear that that is the case?
Yes, it's very clear that that's the case. Now, if you have a foreign-born population that's, say, 10%, you'd expect that to be reflected statistically when it comes to the perpetrators of sexual offences. So 10% are foreign-born perpetrators. But that's not the case. It's far, far higher. And again, like I said, depending on your country that you're looking at, it tends to be Muslim countries, not exclusively, but they tend to be the main perpetrators of sexual offences. And so what we do in the documentary is, I think it was important to actually have something with empirical evidence. I've had a degree of traction in trying to fight this from the lived experience perspective, to coin a horrible term of the left wing, and just say things and really sort of break the barriers in talking about this and say things on account of when I walked to work, this happened, or a friend told me that happened. I think you're only really taken seriously, and it shouldn't have to be this way, actually, especially when women are talking about, their safety. You shouldn't have to turn around and say, I've had to go to the corners of the internet to dig out official statistics because we don't publish them. It shows, how seriously the establishment are taking women's safety in this country. But when you're able to turn around and statistically say 1 in 4 people in UK prisons for sexual offences was born in a different country, so that's 25% of sexual offenders, when we know that the foreign-born population is not 25%, we've got a problem. There is a trend here, and we need to dig down into that trend so we can start to take an approach that will protect women. Now, whatever that approach may be, I don't know. I've got a few ideas, but to not talk about it at all, to cover it up, to demonize people who do want to talk about, I live in a particular neighborhood and some of the men in that neighborhood are behaving like this. It's woeful that as a society, we feel we have to be able to generate hard and fast statistics that other people want to challenge, when it's actually, we look at things through the prism of these being, the common denominator being the Muslim culture. It's very clear in the Muslim culture, the attitudes towards women, the fact that they expect women to veil themselves so as not to essentially be temptresses to men is a starting point that is hugely divergent from the sort of 21st century westernized starting point. So I think it sort of stands to reason that this is likely to be a problem. But I did think it was important to create something that was well researched. And as a result, there really hasn't been any hit back against it. There hasn't been any angry retaliation because it's very hard when faced with evidence to turn around and say you're being xenophobic.
But I wonder, firstly, the issue with xenophobia or racism or whatever it is, we're talking about a belief system with Islam in particular, aren't we? It's not really a country or a race, and that people are so worried about being racist. The Celebrity Big Brother, I don't know if you saw, there was that Trisha woman shouted at Fabricant. Is it Michael Fabricant?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, because he said people should come to this country and try to adapt. And she said, are you being Islamophobic? And he went, I haven't mentioned Islam. And it was interesting that her mind went to that.
Yeah. But also, why is it a phobia? Phobia is an irrational fear of something. So triskaidekaphobia, fear of the number 13. The number 13 can't technically come and hurt you. The number 13 doesn't blow up arenas of Ariana Grande concerts. The number 13 doesn't form grooming gangs and attack white working class girls, specifically target them. The number 13 hasn't committed mass stabbing offences. The number 13 doesn't have terrorist organisations attached to it that sort of wages, massive attacks on New York City and Munich and Madrid. So why is it a phobia to be afraid of elements of Islam when, I'm pretty certain if you saw the same extremism perpetrated in the same way in Christianity, Hinduism, Sikhism, Buddhism, Judaism, then people might be phobic of those religions.
No, absolutely.
The reason we need this, or we don't need it, but the reason why the Labour government seems to think we need the idea of Islamophobia written into our legal system is because people are afraid of Islam. It didn't come from nowhere.
Yeah. And I suppose I want to strongman the other side, and that those who say it's phobia. Strongman the word? I think it is, to sort of give the best argument for them. They would, is that right?
Strawman?
Strawman's the other side.
Yeah, I don't know.
And strawman, I believe strawman is when you deliberately
when you set up,
you misinterpret what they say deliberately, so you win the argument. And then strongman is the opposite. And you say, I'm going to build up their argument. Let's do that the best I can.
Right.
And I suppose they would say, okay, those things do happen in extreme elements of Islam, but it is not the majority. Those terrorist attacks are horrific, but there are also murders by just white people, and it doesn't mean you should be scared of white people and have white people phobia. What would you say to that?
Well, I think people have phobias of all sorts, concerns about all sorts of things. When I walk down the street at night by myself, which I don't do anymore, am I scared? Yes. Am I scared of a man attacking me? Yes. Does that mean I'm scared of all men? No, but I'm fearful if I'm traveling by myself as a young woman late at night of being harassed or approached, or your personal safety is something as a woman you think about all the time, even if it's not late at night. If you just happen to be walking in a big city and turn a corner and it's a secluded alley and you hear footsteps behind you, you're looking in the windows of the reflection to see who it is, or you're deliberately speeding up and listening to see if those footsteps also speed up, or you're thinking in your head, where could I jump into if things are a bit funny, or you turn around to see who's behind you.
And your experience is that it's not just men. You've told me before, is it MENCAP the word? Middle Eastern something, Afghanistan, Pakistan.
I thought MENCAP was some sort of charity.
I think it is. Maybe it's MENAP.
For people with learning difficulties or something.
Yeah, it might be the MENAP, Middle Eastern and North African and Pakistan.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, 9 times out of 10 in my experience, it has been men who, actually, no, I think you can throw in other nationalities in there. It tends to be men who are discernibly not born and raised here. I'm pretty sure, actually, where I live in London, there must be some sort of migrant hotel nearby. There must be, because you can tell the people who are sort of fresh off the boat, so to speak, fresh off the dinghy. There is something you think that person's completely new here, that the way they act and look, you think that they're not someone who's been born and bred here. So it isn't about colour of skin, because these people might be from, sub-Saharan Africa. They might be from Albania. They might be from, but there is something in I can't explain what it is, but all humans have a capacity to make assumptions, through body language, through all sorts of things. And if we didn't make assumptions, our personal safety would hugely be at risk. And so you can sort of tell when somebody is like, right, you're staying in one of those migrant hotels. I can tell by the way you're sort of loitering, or I can tell by the way that you're in a group of people who look similar, who look a bit sort of unkempt perhaps, If you didn't have the stats, which you do have, then you could maybe be accused of, well, hang on, this is anecdotal stuff. Yeah. But you do have the stats now. And I believe in your documentary, it showed they've quadrupled the attacks now, I think sexual attacks in the last 10 years. Yeah, exactly. And you have to ask yourself what's changed in the last 10 years. And I think what we do know has changed radically is inward migration to this country. And we didn't have a problem. So more than 10 years ago, it was around sort of the mid sort of early noughties, the sort of 2006, 2007, that we had a huge wave of immigration coming from Eastern Europe. We didn't have that sort of problem then. I cannot remember anyone going, oh, well, all those Polish builders, they're sex pests. It's been where we've had this sort of radically new wave of migration, particularly coming from the developing world and from countries which have nothing in common with the United Kingdom. They barely share a language. They don't share any culture. They don't share religious views. That is, if you're from a certain class in those countries, then that's different. But where you've got a lot of young men who are used to being in countries where women are veiled, or they have very sort of ultra-conservative views of women's liberty, and then they come to the United Kingdom. There's even TikTok videos that are made by the people traffickers to advertise their services to young men, saying, here are pictures of girls on a night out in Essex, scantily clad, come to Britain, land of milk and honey. They're using that as a ploy to say, this is the country you want to be in. And also, I'm going to say something which will sort of attract guffaws of disgust from people who don't want to have their minds open to what could be a reality of what's happening. When a lot of these migrants, when they're in Italy, when they're in Spain, when they're in Greece, when they first sort of made it onto mainland Europe, when people ask them, where do you want to go? What is your goal? What is your end destination? You often hear Germany, the UK, Denmark, Sweden. You basically largely hear, you don't hear people go, oh, I want to end up in Spain. I want to live in Italy. I just love, all the fountains and the Renaissance art and pasta. Yeah. They always seem to want to come to the sort of Germanic, Scandinavian, Anglo-Saxon nations. And I wonder why. Is that because we all have a far more accommodating welfare system? That could be part of it. I think part of the appeal is the allure of the exotic women. Exotic to them. Yeah. And
Blonde.
I really do think, I think that is potentially a huge part of the appeal.
Scantily clad. I mean, the further north you go, that is, I mean, I don't know if that's a stereotype, but they wear less clothes, get drunk. All things.
So certainly in the UK, I'm sure if you get up to Lapland, they're probably not out there, drinking Prosecco in Kardashian costumes.
Yeah.
But I do wonder because, you've got to think about this. Islam is a religion where men are told their reward for being good is to go to a form of heaven and be looked after by a load of virgins. I mean, that's weird. If your idea of heaven is having a multitude of women who are so young that they have not had any sexual experience, attending to your every need, then you've got a pretty sort of, I would say, fetishized view of women.
Especially because you're told your whole life you have to be quite conservative there. Women are covering up and all of those kinds of things. It's almost inevitable that when they get here, it's going to be just this eruption of insanity.
You'd think if a man has had his brain programmed to think that way and view women that way, and if his cultural belief system, religious belief system actually fundamentally outlines the terms of reward in the sort of domination and ownership and hypersexualization of untouched women, then that's going to have a huge impact on, how you integrate into the Western society that doesn't have those viewpoints where women aren't covered up because they know that that's the way that the men in their countries have been tuned to thinking, and yet, it's dangerous.
Everything's getting more expensive right now. Groceries, bills, even toothpaste. So when I find something that actually saves me money, I'm all in. That's why I use Coupair, a completely free browser extension that automatically finds the best coupon codes while you shop online. You go to checkout, Coupair tests a bunch of codes, boom, best one applied. No hunting, no guesswork, just instant discounts from over 3 million stores. But it doesn't stop there. Coupair also gives you cash back from 76,000 plus retailers like Amazon, Walmart, and Sephora. That's real money, redeemable via PayPal, gift cards, or directly to your bank. And if you're about to buy something, Coupair compares prices across the web so you don't get ripped off. It works on Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Edge, and Opera. Over 9 million people use it every week. So if you're feeling the pinch right now, Coupair, make sure you keep more of your money. Click the link below and start saving today. It's free, it's easy, and it just works. You've seen that Kemi Badenoch and there's those two the guy and the woman from, I don't know what it was, BBC, and they're saying, have you watched Adolescence? And she's going, I don't need to watch Adolescence. And they're going, but how can you not watch Adolescence? And she's going, there's grooming gangs, there's this, pointing to these issues. The people that you've just mentioned, they've grown up, not with social media of Andrew Tate, which is damaging, of course it is, but they've grown up with veiled people and told about the 72 virgins and those kinds of things. That's a much bigger concern, surely, than a TV show about social media.
Well, yeah, you don't see anyone going, well, have you watched the programme 3 Girls, which was actually based upon 3 girls who were victims of the grooming gangs. This fetishization, this beatification of that bloody series on Netflix is perverse.
Do you think it might have been a psyop? Because it came 3 months after or 4 months. I'm sure it was already in creation anyway, but I don't mean the film itself or the series, but the way it was pushed.
I have never seen so much publicity taking place. In fact, one of the reasons it first fell on my radar, I was going to work at Talk, and on the same floor, you've got TalkSport Virgin Radio. And there's all this hubbub because Stephen Graham and that other guy, the black guy who plays the cop, I don't know his name, were in the radio studios. And people are like, oh, look who it is. Anyway, they walked back across the floor. And I was like, what were they in for? And someone said, oh, there's this amazing new series that's going to be on Netflix. It's going to be huge. It launches tonight or something like that. So I went and watched it literally on day one because I'd already heard this hype. And I didn't think much of it. I found it kind of tedious. I'm not saying that because, I genuinely didn't find it. Everyone's like, isn't it cinematographically brilliant? I'm like, it's all right.
Stylish. But there's a point he's in B&Q and he was sort of asking about which paints to get. And there was because the camera can't cut, it did feel like, gosh, they've left the cameras running here and I'm in B&Q. What paint shall I get? I don't know what paint will get rid of the strip. But shall I get the paint number 1 or 2? And I was watching like, gosh, if I was in B&Q now, I'd be bored.
It's a brilliantly achieved
It is good.
thing when it's something like, was it 1970? What was the World War One thing where they let the...
1917, I think it was.
Is it 19?
That's a beautiful
Or is it
film.
the German? Whichever. No,
That's a great
maybe
film.
it's
That was all in one shot.
All in one shot,
supposedly.
yes. Yeah, and that is crazy. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And you really are with this person's 24 hours. Whereas this, it's all in one shot, but it's also not, because across 4 episodes, it's a different...
Sure. It's an
thing.
amazing technical whatever, but
Is it? I don't know.
it was good. It was good. But this now fetishization of like, oh my God, a young, good-looking 13-year-old kid who's very popular and intelligent.
And has a nice
he's not
grounded
popular.
family life, a mum and dad who
Mum
very
and dad
clearly love
loving.
each other, secure background.
By all means, make the series, but I don't know how the government have
But
looked at
it's
that and
not.
gone, oh, that's something we
But
should
it's
start
not
talking about.
real.
Well, you can make a series about anything. It's a particular thing that happened in the series. I think that's fine.
I think young boys are being brought up on certain parts of the internet of misogynistic attitudes, and I've said this for years that we need to do something about user-generated pornography. That is the big issue, right? If you're going to have a world where there is no taboo attached to the most extreme forms of sexual entertainment, and it's available to anybody at a click of a button, you're going to end up with a mess.
So in that sense, adolescence is making a relevant point.
I think it would make more sense to me if that drama series showed the sort of showed little boys having extreme anxiety because they just constantly need to turn on the laptop to watch porn, or the sort of things they're saying to the girls. And, if it was a young girl aged 13 who had been sexually assaulted or even raped by, boys of a similar age or older, if it had been, it does touch on some of those things. But the fictionalized character of this boy going and stabbing a girl because he's become an incel, it just didn't marry up. And if this was something that was plaguing society, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but if it was really plaguing society in the same way the grooming gangs have plagued society, with tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of victims, we'd know about it. But there's been about 1 or 2 recorded cases. Ever. And actually, with those cases, guess what? It wasn't the white working class lad from the stable home.
Oh yeah, I meant there's 1 or 2 cases ever of a white working class, or if any. People are struggling to find a kid like that who's ever done a thing like that in the UK.
So it doesn't talk to reality at all. No. And there was a really interesting, I think it's that interview with Kemi Badenoch. There was the one on LBC when Nick Fry was like, but why haven't you watched it? And she's like, I'm sorry, am I supposed to, as part of my job as a politician, have to watch certain entertainment programs?
Star Wars.
But she's interviewed later on at BBC Breakfast, and I'm pretty sure, I saw the clip the other day, I'm pretty sure the presenter said, have you seen the documentary?
They did. So that's
it's not a documentary.
Right. It's that guy, I've seen him a lot. He's like a white guy, and it's a woman who's
Naga Munchetty, and is the other one Charlie?
They called it a documentary.
They called it a documentary.
They called it a documentary. And even Kemi accidentally called it a documentary. She said, I haven't watched a documentary. Then she later said, I haven't watched the drama. And Keir Starmer called it a documentary twice.
It's not what the hell is going on?
That feels like a psyop.
Yeah.
Because 3 months after the Southport stabbing, or 6 months after, whatever it is, Keir Starmer for months has been pushing for more online control that he wants over the populace. He wants to blame it all on that so he can introduce more safety bills, rightly or wrongly, to the country. And no one's mentioning Andrew Tate seems to be the bad guy here, and I don't think he very much is the bad guy in many respects, but he's the Lord Voldemort from adolescence.
Yeah.
Despite, I don't even know if he's mentioned, but it is Andrew Tate. But Andrew Tate converted to Islam.
Right.
There's a reason he did that.
I wonder why he was so drawn to Islam with its 72 virgins.
Well, also because where's he going to get his audience?
Women.
It's his audience.
Right. Because that level of hypersexualization of women and latent misogyny and men being powerful and superior over women and owning women and treating women as chattel and seeing women as, of no significant value unless is it chattel where you can sort of buy and sell?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, go on, sorry.
But basically treating women as slaves unless you have the one woman at home who is superwoman of immense tolerance will put up with all the bullshit of her husband and wash and clean and bring up the kids. That is sort of baked into the sort of cruder elements of the Muslim faith.
Yeah. That's what Tommy Robinson thinks. I asked him, why did Andrew Tate convert? And he said, Andrew Tate doesn't care about any of this stuff. He just wants money. He's just playing a role. And he knew converting to Islam would get him many more followers.
A far bigger audience, without a doubt. But also it's sort of, I think a lot of men. So there's a phenomenon, isn't there, of the fat ginger convert, right?
Yeah, what is that?
Okay, so I've got a theory on this. I think it's quite obvious.
You should explain what that is, just in case people are watching.
All right, so you see these videos of white guys who have converted to Islam, and they walk around in the sort of giant salwar. They're usually pot-bellied with a big ginger beard and go like, "Salam alaikum, yeah, bro, brother, yeah, bismillah," and stuff like that. And they sort of swagger around like they're members of the coolest club and know like the odd word in Arabic. Because for them, it's like being part of a gang, but also being part of that gang gives access to them having, a pretty little girl at home who has to wear hijab and she must stay and fulfill all of his sexual fantasies. Because in life, would that fat ginger have even got a snog at the school disco? No. And so I kind of think that it is, it's very attractive as almost a gangland mentality to repressed or ostracized young men.
Yeah.
I think it's why it flourishes in prisons.
Overweight people of a ginger persuasion. I don't want to offend
No, I was saying to my other half, who's got sort of a ginger element to him, he should, if he got a bit tubbier, then if there was a terrorist attack, he'd probably get off by just saying some word in Arabic. They'd think he was one of them.
Yeah, well, that ginger thing is unfortunate, isn't it? Because I think it's one of these subjective things. So I might be wrong, but all the paintings and things like Henry VIII, they all seem to be sort of fat gingers.
My mum's a redhead. And my boyfriend's a redhead. So I love my gingers.
You can say what you want about them.
I can say I'm immune to it. I'm pretty sure if I were to have children, there's a good chance they're going to be on the red spectrum.
And they'll look back at an interview you did 20 years previous where you
they'll convert to Islam.
Let us hope not. Well, that's something, I think I've spoken to you about that before, that thing of when you've got a wife or husband or, you feel like you can actually talk about these things honestly without people assuming you're against fat gingers.
Oh, but have we got to a stage now that people can't take the piss out of gingers? I mean, that's always existed.
Well, there is an argument. Well, hang on, we've got all the microaggressions. We've got to be so careful what we say about anybody, but we can say what we want about fat gingers. That's not fair. So I think we should be able to say what we say about all different kinds of people and make some jokes and things.
The dumb blonde is it's a sort of, it's as old as time. Yeah. Or if not the dumb blonde, like I said, the hypersexualized blonde, bringing me back round to what I was talking about, if that's the reason why a load of men from the Middle East want to go to Sweden, for example. That one actually does come with risk factors. If sort of blonde hair is seen as synonymous with sexuality, the sort of Marilyn Monroe. That actually does have a real impact if you're a woman walking around with blonde hair.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's a bit like red rag to a bull. But again, just, these things exist in humanity. We characterize, we make assumptions. The ability to make an assumption as a human being is so important to our personal safety, our tribal safety, the safety of our children. If we didn't have the ability to see a marauding group of, Vikings coming over the horizon, raising clubs and growling and think, hey up, that might be a problem. It turns out actually they were just doing a sort of, merry dance together and they came to share some wine. But if you didn't have the ability to say that looks like a threat, we'd be doomed. It's just animal instinct is inbuilt into us.
I feel like what you're explaining there is a microcosm for where our culture is going now. We're sort of almost ordering our own population to put down those barriers and those concerns and just let ourselves be taken over.
Yeah, and what's becoming so frightening to me, actually, is we've pushed so far in the direction of trying to eliminate any sort of tribalistic human, characteristics in society, that there's now something that's going completely the opposite direction. I don't know if you've noticed this, but the rise in ethno-nationalism is quite worrying.
Yeah.
I can understand why people say now we've got this far, we've got to push to go as far as we can because we're actually civilizationally worried or existentially worried. I get that when you look at how rapidly demographics are changing. But it's now going into this race to the bottom where you kind of feel if some of these people who once upon a time I thought were sort of plugged into the main board had their way, they would be marching people onto, military flights to be taken to some foreign country simply because they didn't have white skin. I think there's an element of this bubbling. Well, I don't think I see it, that this is bubbling up. And that is so dangerous.
This is a big concern. And I just want to reiterate or try to summarize what you said for people who aren't sort of plugged in and following this and what ethno-national, because I'm seeing the same thing as you.
Right.
And I suppose it's an overreaction to this woke multiculturalism and diversity is our strength. And that overreaction, and understandably, because these people are going, well, hang on, what about the white boys who are performing worse than anyone else in schools? What about this? What about that? They're stressed and they're threatened, but it means that it's coming out in a very concerning way, as you say. And there are a lot of people now who really are about white England and English heritage, and that being more. And I've had some of them on my show. I had this debate with Charlie Bentley Astor, with in good faith debate, where she told me how important it was, and I said to her, it felt almost obsessive compulsive. She said she never left England. She only wants to eat food from England. Everything had to be sort of white England around her in some respects. I don't want to misinterpret what she said. It's not fair, but
again, it's sort of built into humans to protect your tribe, and your tribe is sort of, if you want to go back to the sort of animalistic evolutionary idea of what tribe is, it's probably we're white English, or we're, Dravidian Southern Indian, or we're, that is normally what people look at as a species. We look the same, we have the same characteristics, we run together as a pack. And I think it's sort of normal for humans to want to preserve that. I think by and large, most people will marry and reproduce with people of a similar background to them. I think it's just sort of, like I said, built into us. And you're never going to eradicate that from the human mindset because it's part of being human. Yet, like you said, things are being pushed so hard in the opposite direction that it's now leading to this overcorrection, this backlash, which, my stepsister's mixed race. Are they going, she was born in this country. Her, she's got a Bristolian accent.
I'm sorry to hear that.
It's a beautiful accent.
Oi.
Like Babber.
Yeah.
But if they were to have it their way, is she going to be regarded as someone who needs to be deported or treated? I mean, I see this as a direct result. I'm not blaming so much the ethno-nationalism on people on the right. I actually blame it more on people on the left who sort of pushed things so far that, a bit like Newton's, what is it, the third rule or whatever, that every force has an equal and opposite force. The more extreme woke things have got, the more stuff on the right is getting, to me, extreme. Yeah. And what I find even more alarming is just trying to raise these issues now on certain social media platforms. You will get a lot of heat. You don't get it. I used to respect you. Now I think you've gone soft.
We'll get some.
You're controlled opposition. That's what they keep saying, controlled opposition. And it's like, no, you've gone crazy. You're now thinking in a way that is dangerous. And actually, if you were to put that to the test, if you were to be made to, go through all your old school friends and your wider family and pick people out based on the colour of their skin or difference in religion and then tell them to get out of the country, would you do that? I should hope a lot of people who seem to think that that might be a solution would think twice.
Yeah. My wife's an immigrant. So there you go.
Yeah, you've got diplomatic immunity for
I can say what I want.
Immigration. Yeah.
It's always the way. Farage, his wife or wives or whatever.
He's called Farage. That's not a British name.
Nigel Farage. Yeah, I agree. And it's something I try to speak about as much as possible, because I think you and I also don't want to be considered these sort of far-right extremists or anything. I think most people watching both of our shows are that way as well. But we do get pushback. I will get a lot of pushback. People are very angry at me for saying Charlie sounded like she had OCD. But look, I think you're saying as well, we understand that urge and where it comes from. I understand the woke urge as well. I understand that woke, like you can see where that comes from. These are often well-meaning people who say, oh, look, there's unfairness here and here. Can we be authoritarian to sort it out. And I think that's the problem on both sides.
Yeah.
They want to implement measures.
There's a chunk of people in the middle who get dragged along in one direction or the other. There are people on the fringes who are truly, truly malign, on both the woke fringes and the far-right fringes. And it's amazing because we've lived in a sort of glut of centrism for so long now, and that centrism has been pulled further and further to the left.
Yeah.
If we were just allowed to settle where most of us are, which is right-wing in a tolerant and open-minded way, if we were to control our borders so there wasn't this sort of civilizational existential threat where people aren't integrating, where all of those built-in survival mechanisms that we've had through evolution suddenly rise to the fore, it's a bit like what... oh God, his name's gone, Rivers of Blood, Enoch Powell. Yeah. It's what Enoch Powell predicted. And of course, as soon as you cite Enoch Powell, people are like, oh, well, it's got a bit tasty. But he was a top scholar, an academic. He was the sort of youngest person to make professor in whatever his, I can't remember what his subject matter was, but this guy was ridiculously bright. And what he said was when you get to a certain stage where the native population has had such an insurgency from outside populations, it leads to violence because that is the sort of, that's human nature. And there's truth to that wherever you look at it. And what's ironic is people on the left will hear something like that said by Enoch Powell and go, that's disgusting, that's racist. And yet they'll be the first people to say, oh, but Israel incurring into Palestine and the Gaza Strip. Oh, but the white colonials who went over to India and said, now you must drink tea and build railways. Oh, the Australians encroaching on Aboriginal territory. They will actually stand to defend where this has happened in history when the perpetrator has been the Anglo-Saxon. But the idea, I think there's a huge phalanx of people who want to see Anglo-Saxonism destroyed. They want to see it gone. I think there's something really harrowing about the term global majority. Because to me, it sort of suggests that, white people as the global minority, it's a bit like, oh yeah, a few more decades and they're all gone. There's something quite, I think, sinister.
See, I think that's a bit OCD as well. There's sort of a certain type of white woke person who wants to sort of just make everything, again, mixed race or everything not white anymore.
Well, yeah, but global majority is basically everyone but white.
Yeah,
it's a very funny way of viewing the world. It's a very white-centric way of viewing the world, but it's now used in woke circles as the sort of polite way of saying it's the new BAME, isn't it?
Yeah.
The global majority.
I think there's something to the wokeness that makes the sort of the left at the moment white supremacists in a sense, or white culture supremacists. Because I think the only argument they can have at the moment, because I think we're saying here, look, if you invite enough people to this land who want to live a very different way from how we want to live, then as has happened in Afghanistan and Lebanon and several other countries, it might be in 3 years, it might be in 7 years, it might be in 11 years, there will become a time when our elected officials are mostly from that culture, and that will be our culture now, and it won't come back. I think their point is, no, because our culture is so good that they will want to all adapt to it.
Right.
If we give them money, and that's turned out not to be true.
Yeah.
They like the Levi jeans. They don't like much else.
Right.
So I think that's a supremacist
And generationally, it's getting worse. I think we thought when we had the first wave of immigrants in the sort of 50s and 60s who became the bus drivers and who worked in the mills in the north and things like that. And they came over wanting to be part of Britain. They were more likely to have a picture of the Queen on the wall and have a full English tea set than the native Brits. And we therefore assumed that their children would be even more integrated, and so on and so on. And yet it hasn't happened that way. Not in every case, but in a lot of cases, it's gone the other direction. And the offspring of those offspring feel like they need to cling to something bigger and other to identify themselves as something separate from the population. And it's made people a lot more radical in immigrant communities. And then on top of that, you've brought in loads and loads of more people from those communities who can live as economic units. They don't have to integrate. They don't even have to speak the language. If modern technology technology as it is, they can watch the news channel from back at home. They can FaceTime their relatives. They can get, more welfare from the state and live in a proper sort of 2 up, 2 down with electricity and clean running water. They can go to the doctors and there'll be a translator. They don't have to be part of this at all. And very often they now live in communities that when they walk down the street, it's all the food shops that they'd find back at home. It's people dressed in the same way as they'd find back at home. It's probably people who back at home come from a street 3 streets along. And you can't blame them because it happens that way. When I lived in China, I spent all of my time with English expats because most Chinese people don't speak English and I didn't speak Chinese. Chinese food is amazing. I love it. But when you can't understand, what you're reading in the characters, it's like some crazy game of what are you getting in this restaurant? And the culture is very different. There's not much of a drinking culture. There's not pub culture in China. So you end up meeting other expats and going to the English style bar and you'll eat the Chinese food, but every now and then you go out for a curry if you're living in Shanghai or a French restaurant or one of those other things. We naturally gravitate towards our own. Yeah. It's just, like I said, it's human nature. But it's why when you start building communities that get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, then they're all going to start jostling for resources, essentially.
Yeah.
And the more that there's an economic crisis in a country, the more those divisions are exacerbated.
Imagine if China had 10% of its population were European or English and the problems that would cause.
Some smart ass will probably listen to that and say, yes, once upon a time in 1880, before the Opium Wars or whatever, that was the case.
Yeah, and they criticise it, don't they? It's what you said before. They criticise it when it's us doing it somewhere else. Yeah. Look, I mean, there's a lot of talk of the indigenous Americans, for example, and when the Europeans came over and made America, how horrible it was for them. And although I don't agree with reparations, they're absolutely right. It was terrible for them. They lost their culture. They lost their land, the indigenous Americans. It was awful for them. It was great for the Americans who came over. The same thing's happening here. It might be good for the people coming over. It's not good for those already here.
I feel like, school trips now, kids should be taken to, what's that bit of Turkey? I'd love to go to it, where you have the lovely hot air balloon rides, but you've also got the sort of network of cave systems all underground, which is where the early Christians had to hide from, the Muslim oppressors. It'd be amazing for kids at school to be taught about the changing demographics of Lebanon, of Syria, of Iran, of Iraq. The most persecuted and murdered religion on the planet is Christianity to this day, whether you're talking about Boko Haram, the Mujahideen, the ISIS versus the Yazidis. Christians are driven out of their homelands. The women are taken as slaves. They're murdered. They're kidnapped. They're abused. Even when the more extreme elements aren't happening, they still face in Muslim countries a jizya, specific tax and no property rights and so on and so forth because they're not Muslim. And we don't talk about that at all. It doesn't matter when the victim is a Christian.
Well, it's the same with the Jews in that area. You won't find a Jew living in any of those countries now. They're all forced out. And then the irony of genocide Israel's committing is that the actual genocide happened around the whole Middle East where all the Jews were forced out relatively recently. And that's why, by the way, when we sometimes do episodes a little bit about Israel, I try to say to people, because most of the audience is not Jewish, like 99% I would imagine, are not Jewish. And I'd want them to understand, like, this is important for you guys as well, that Israel remains in place. Because once that's gone, we're all up for grabs.
Yeah, and it's happening here. The exodus of Jews from Britain is taking place. And it's almost like, going to the doctor with a scary looking rash. If you ignore that, it's the first sign, I think, of the degradation of our society. When the Jews go, it's dangerous for us and we want to leave. It really is a red flag. Yeah. And it's happening in Britain. And, the Jewish community in Britain have always just been peaceful. They've contributed. Where's the Jewish terrorism? Where's the integration, by and large, the Jewish community has been fantastic as well. And it really alarms me. And again, we don't pay any attention to things going on culturally in other cities as much as we should do, such as Leicestershire, where you've got Muslims attacking Hindus.
Yeah.
And actually this is happening with Sikhs as well, Muslims attacking Sikhs, trying to force them to convert.
Sikhs who are very, very good at adapting to British culture.
Brilliant. I love the Sikhs. Everyone loves the Sikhs. Love the Hindus as well.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, I've got love of all the other world religions. And it's not that I have a hatred towards Islam, but I'm like, just, you cannot rewire my brain to not take on board the things that I've seen happen historically in Muslim countries and the things I'm seeing happening in the modern world at the hands of Muslim extremists. You can't make that untrue.
Is Birmingham the first city to fall?
Oh, interesting. I mean, arguably cities have already fallen, Bradford and, places like that. There already are cities that have gone. I haven't been to Birmingham properly for a long time. So
You've seen these videos online. You see every now and then of just like people carrying like dead cows on their shoulders and halal stuff going on and just riots and things. That's every time I see a video of Birmingham.
Really? I've not even seen it.
Yeah, it's just nuts. And now there's been the rubbish stuff. Have you seen all the rubbish everywhere on the streets?
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, what has happened to that city?
It's a disgrace. And do you know what's really angered me about and again, this is where you can tell that people are in the country who have no sense of ownership or loyalty to the country. Because I would imagine that once upon a time when we lived in a high trust integrated society, when there's the lack of bin collections, the community gets together to try and minimise the impact. What we've got now is a load of people going, oh, look, there's some festering bins. I'm going to chuck this soiled mattress on top.
Yeah.
Out goes this crap fridge. And I just think if you don't look at the bones of the place around you and see it as the society, the civilization, the infrastructure built by your parents, their parents, their parents, their parents, when you don't get that sense of this is ours and we belong to it and therefore we want to preserve it, it's a bit like, when some people go to an Airbnb and trash it because they just think, yeah, I'm paying, someone else is going to come clean it up. Or leave a hotel room in a mess. Most people, when they check out of a hotel room, have left it in a condition they wouldn't leave their bedrooms, like that in the morning.
You don't need an ethnic lineage in a place to not treat. If I go on holiday to Spain or India or wherever, I'm not chucking stuff out the window, although they do. I've seen videos of this as well. It is apparently policy in first class trains that go across India, the people working there, they just gather all the rubbish, chuck it out in the
India. There's a fascinating. I love India. I used to live in India and I adore India. But there's this really fascinating thing online, a challenge where people say go onto Google World and try and drop your pin in India, do a 360, and if there's no rubbish anywhere,
Wow.
And you can't do it. You can play the game for hours. You just drop a pin, so in the middle of nowhere in India, you go, oh yeah, look, there it is. There's
it's rubbish.
Yeah.
It's just a difference, and I don't know. Well, I mean, some of the other issues that you spoke about, I think, in this documentary were FGM going on, the issues with halal here. What's going on?
Yeah, halal is that's where and it's a very difficult circle to square, so to speak. When I say, look, I personally would like my animals to be pre-stunned before slaughter because I think it's less cruel, then it brings in kosher, doesn't it? So but
it's just as right to criticise that.
Yeah.
I imagine kosher is the same as, I don't even know enough about it. I'm Jewish, but I'm an atheist. I don't know all that stuff. If it is done the same way as halal, it needs to be outlawed right this second. And the number of Jews who are actually kosher is a very, very small number of them. I know loads of my friends growing up were Jewish. I didn't know any kosher Jews. Obviously they exist. Those are the more orthodox. And I would criticize them as much as I'd criticize, or not as much, but almost as much as Islam, if they made up 10% of the country. But they don't right now. They're a tiny, tiny percentage. Yeah. I was going through Twitter and I saw for a split second, oh, what's this? It was a cow, and I saw what they were doing, and I can't get the image out of my mind. I quickly went past it, but it was too late. What they do.
Oh God, I couldn't.
It is beyond barbaric, and that's not a comment. I think most people watching who are not vegetarians or whatever, fine, what you said, stun them, do everything as humanely as possible. If it's kosher the same, get rid of it.
If you're going to be a meat eater, which I am, I bloody love my meat, but I insist on high standards of welfare because we are the custodians of the world. And most people would find it very difficult to go and kick their neighbour's cat. And yet they'll go and buy cheap meat from a supermarket and not question its provenance and how that animal's been reared. And I think that, again, we're going down a completely different route, but we live in a self-indulgent society where people will buy, pack of 6 cheap chicken breasts and cook a couple and then leave them in the fridge and then go, oh, they're going a bit green, and throw them away. I cannot throw away meat. To me, that's an animal's life that is just being routinely discarded because I can't be bothered, because I didn't get around to cooking it. I really find it, and even I cooked a big piece of lamb last night for dinner, and there's leftover lamb. And I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I've just got a bowl full of shredded lamb. And so when I get home after this, I'm kind of thinking to myself, right, maybe I'll make little pasties. All I know is that lamb, it's not loads, but that lamb is going to be used again, because I just think the idea of throwing away meat really cheapens
the life of the animal.
The reality of what's gone into creating that meat.
It's horrific. And you know, it really, it's upsetting. And I think most people are upset by that. They just don't want to think about the actual cruelty and what's involved in it. And as you say, it doesn't mean you have to be a vegetarian or anything like that. You do your thing, but
right.
Those conditions for the animals, I think most people are on board with that.
We actually have brilliant welfare standards in the UK. We've got some of the best farming practices in the world. I mean, we don't support our farmers enough. I haven't just sort of jumped on the protect our farmers because of the inheritance tax. I've for a long time had it sort of the sort of buy British local farms mentality. Harder to do when you live in a city, but if you can get to a farmer's market or a farm shop, the meat might cost a bit more, but it's better quality, and learn to use it properly. Because the minute you sort of, throw things like farming away, it's very hard to bring them back. And that government policy is so dangerous and so erroneous, wanting to seize farmers' land to build wind turbines, solar panel farms, new developments. At the moment, the percentage of food that we consume in this country, grown in this country, is about 60%. 40% is imported. That's now going to shift even more to focus more on importations. We saw during the pandemic how quickly supply chains can be disrupted. Everyone went crazy. It's always toilet roll, isn't it, they go for first? Get that boggy in. In the Second World War, the ratio of the food that we grow compared to the food we import was similar to us now. And then what happened for years? Rationing. And it suddenly became a part of the war. Dig for victory. Grow your own fruit and vegetables. We need people working the farmland, toiling in the fields if we're going to have a population that doesn't starve to death. Wars come about when nobody expects them. Nobody predicted, oh, great, there's going to be a Second World War in 10 years' time. We better bring farming back. They come about when people don't expect them. And if you are not in a sure-footed position as a self-sufficient state, you really find yourself wanting and in crisis. And if you want to sort of read the runes about where things might go, China, which for a long time has relied on imports because it's got such a massive population, is having a huge push to become almost entirely self-sufficient in terms of its agriculture. And if China's going in that direction and we're going in the opposite direction, I know who I'd rather back for having read the long-term prospects properly. Yeah,
there's a great article I read. I can't remember who it was by, but it was just this point that nations have gone from this very globalist, everyone's together, to recently now it's everyone for themselves. We can't rely on the French, the Germans, the Americans, the Australians. We can't rely on anyone.
But it's in terms of, so 80% of everything that is used and consumed, whether it be the toy you bought from Amazon, whether it's the gas that's in your hob, whether it's the medicines that you're eating, the food, the vast majority of product is moved around the world via the maritime routes. It's not flown in by aeroplanes unless you're a tiny little island. It's moved by ships and shipping cargo. And what we're seeing from the anti-Western axis is this attack on maritime routes. China has been buying up through the Belt and Road Initiative lots of seaports, dry ports, all the rest of it. They're actually building fake atolls by dumping sand in the ocean, going, oh, this is now a Chinese island. We control the seas around it. Yeah. You've got Russia, and Russia is one of the main reasons that Russia's pushed into the parts of Ukraine where it has. Odessa. But of course, Crimea went first, is they want to control the Black Sea for those maritime routes. And we've already seen with the Ukraine war, the sort of gaming of the system with fertilizer and wheat and stuff, oils coming out of Ukraine, creating global inflation, actually leading to certain countries in Africa hugely reliant on those imports from Ukraine to have major cost of living crises, the likes of which, again, have gone underreported. We see the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in the Red Sea trying to attack those routes. controlling the seas is controlling the global economy. And so this is what I'm saying. If we're not self-sufficient, it doesn't actually take much in the fragile world we live in to suddenly find as an island nation, we have severe shortages. And when you have severe shortages, it instantly will lead to a sort of further exacerbation of social tensions, looting, blackouts. I mean, I just imagine if there was a blackout in London, what do you think would happen? Do you think people would just sit at home going, oh, this is funny, let's light some candles? If we had a sustained 3 day blackout, you know people are going to be kicking in Foot Locker.
Yeah, it's going to destroy. I mean,
it's going to go crazy.
This is very worrying, isn't it? I mean, do you have any optimism for the future, or should we all just?
No.
I always point this out, and I apologise to him for doing so. Peter Boghossian, because he's become quite a good friend, and he's always messaging me going, "Get the fuck out of that country. You got to go. You got to go. Just give it to the Muslims and come to Texas."
Right.
You know? I think he's half joking, but.
A lot of people aren't. I'm meeting lots of people now, not just the sort of 10,000 millionaires who have gone, and the capital flight from this country will severely affect our treasury and our economy, but just ordinary people. You know, when I do my radio show, people messaging or phoning in going, yeah, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I've decided this isn't for me anymore. We're going to, my wife and I are moving to Poland. We're moving to Hungary. People are now especially attracted to those high trust integrated societies.
Yeah.
That once upon a time, that once upon a time, 10 years ago, moving to Poland, be like, why did we go to that poor backwater? Now it's sort of, really desirable because of the safety, because of the sort of conservative values. And it is becoming a thing. There's definite flights. And I kind of put myself in a lower version of that because I'm getting out of London. I know you're doing the opposite and I don't know why. I'm like, are you mad?
Yeah. Don't tell people where I'm going. They'll come and get me.
Coming from the West Country back here, and I'm going from here to the West Country because I know what the next 10 years has in store.
That's true. But my family's from around here. So that's it. And there is it's possible if it weren't for my job and if it weren't for my family, maybe I would be having that conversation with my wife. And then you do get the ethno-nationalists going, you see, because you're a Jew, you want to, you're not part of here, you don't want to stay and defend it. To which I say, well, good luck with that when you're hanging from a tree, mate, because you can fight a war. This isn't a war. We're democratically going to lose our country. And when that happens, we've got to go. You and I are fighting, because it's always anonymous trolls who say that. We are fighting. We put our faces and our names out there every day, put ourselves in real trouble. And people have the gall to say to us, or if I dare say, maybe we need to leave. And I'm not leaving, by the way, for everyone. So I'm not. But I do want to I couldn't get it, an Argentinian visa, just in case. And people still say, have you ever
done that thing where you've looked online at have you got your backup country? Is Argentina your backup country then?
What do you mean by online?
So online when you look at a country and go okay, what's the tax?
Oh.
What's the Muslim population?
Yes.
What's the... No, genuinely, real estate, how can I get a visa? Have you done the backup country?
Regarding that reminds me of real estate at the moment. Somebody told me the other day that is sort of a best kept secret within real estate in the United Kingdom. And estate agents speak about it. It's values of houses are now about where there are fewer people
Mosques.
who are, yeah.
Well,
but now they're adding another one to the Lake Districts, and people, what's that going to do to that? But yeah, you're right. Argentina is just because that's where my wife's from. So, and I speak the language, and they lived there before, and would have family out there through her, and that would be the case. But
get that back up. Get it.
Just in case. Although it's often too late, isn't it? By the time there is that kind of, let's say the Independent, which is the Muslim Party, the Independent Party were to gain power in 3 or 7 years' time, I think Trump or his future, whoever takes over from Trump, would probably close off people coming from Europe.
They wash their hands of us. I think it's very clear the message coming from the White House, which is Europe, save yourself. We're not going to do it for you.
Well, why would they open the doors to us if we're now a Muslim country?
And you're supposed to be the vanguard of Western civilization. What are you allowing to happen? And is it fear-mongering? It isn't, because you look at the patterns in history and you can see what's gone on. We've been through this before as Europe. We've had the Crusades, we've had the Spanish Inquisition. No one wants something to be as radical or as extreme as that. But we do need to get to a point where we say the domestic culture is the majority culture, it's the superior culture, it is the only culture. Mm-hmm. And I think if we were to make it's about choosing the positive route, not the negative route. So not saying, right, all you people of, we're going to categorize you as other and we want to deport all of you. Well, no, because you literally don't know, okay? You might have a Muslim woman, full hijab, who is the most gorgeous neighbor you could ever have, who has the picture of the king on a wall and came to Britain because she wanted her kids to have an English education and all the rest of it. The easiest way of doing it is suddenly going, okay, government funding all goes to churches and protecting church buildings and keeping them open as churches. There's not going to be any more government funding towards mosques because at the moment the opposite's happened.
Yeah, well, that's
the tax
insane.
relief on churches has been taken away and mosques have got, I think, quadruple the funding to protect them.
Oh, gosh.
So we need to say, right, churches aren't allowed to be converted into X, Y, and Z. We're going to keep churches open as churches, even if the congregations are tiny, and actually push to get those congregations bigger. The school system is going to be Church of England schools or, secular schools. No more Muslim schools, no more faith schools unless it's Church of England.
But you can't get rid of faith schools. Religion. They won't. They won't.
Yeah, but they should do.
Can you imagine the pushback from all the Hindu, the Sikh ones, the Jewish ones?
But do they have that many? Are there gazillions of Hindu faith schools? And actually, do you know what? If that's the case and they suddenly go, right, because my kid can't go to a Hindus only school, we're going to move back to India. Fine, you weren't integrating. Mm-hmm. So this is my argument. If you actually put all of your weight behind your domestic culture in a positive way, and, you have school assemblies with a Christian overtone to them. You have churches that are being preserved. You have, the BBC goes wild on Lent instead of Ramadan.
Yeah.
And then if you say on the other side to other religions, let's say, for instance, Islam's the only one really to be concerned about, but your services all have to be in English so they can be monitored to make sure that there's no radical preaching going on.
Which there is.
That to me is just safeguarding. And it should be perfectly within the gift of the British people to ask for that. If you then say women shouldn't be covered because it's an overt religious symbol that is contradictory to our native culture, so definitely no niqab, definitely no burqas. If you then said, right, there's no translation services at all. If you go to a doctor's appointment, you either have to find a member of your family to translate for you, or you use your app on your phone, or you learn English. If you started taking away all of these special privileges that they've got, while amplifying positively your domestic culture, you're not actively pushing people onto planes to go. The people who will depart will be the people who don't want to integrate.
Gosh, and fewer would come because they wouldn't see it
as, And I think that's fine. If all of a sudden there's a Bangladeshi family who only the son speaks English and the woman's dressed like a ghost.
Yeah.
And,
you know what, though? It's all well and good until
you might go down liver anymore.
When you see it in real life and you see this sort of old Bangladeshi grandma who's a sweet old lady and she's going to the doctor because no one's talking to her and all this funny English language, and that's really sad.
It is. And, but the thing is, things might be sad, but it's not realistic in life. If I were to move to Cambodia or something, could I rub along without speaking probably English? You can rub along quite nicely in most parts of the world.
Where I lived in France, nobody spoke English. I lived in Montpellier for a couple of years in Bordeaux.
It's lovely down there. They speak Catalan as well, don't they?
Not in Montpellier, but a few hours west of that.
Because I stayed last summer for 6 weeks just near Montpellier.
It's
the
gorgeous.
Corbière region, Aude.
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was all so lovely around there. And then in Bordeaux, I lived for a little bit as well. I was like 20, 21. I had to learn French. It was the only way. If I went to the doctor, no one speaks English.
When I was in Lanzarote during COVID, I went there for a week, and then good old Grant Shapps got rid of the travel bridge. Do you remember when he used to do that thing? So like 3 a.m. midnight, the border's closed, and everyone would scramble to get on a flight. I didn't, and I ended up spending 3.5 months in Lanzarote, and I'd done my knee in. I'd fallen over and cracked open my knee in a big way, and I had to go into hospital basically every couple of days to have it swilled out because the wound had to heal naturally. I'd left it too long before going for stitches. So I got used very much to TIAS Hospital in Lanzarote, where I was going initially about 5 days a week, then 4 days a week, then 3 days a week. They didn't speak a word of English. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't speak English to me. So if I wanted to communicate with them, I had to use the app on my phone or start learning some sentences in Spanish. And before going to the appointment, I think, right, I want to ask them a question about this. And I'm going to have to find out how I do that in Spanish. And I'd sort of have it written on my phone in advance because unfortunately I never learned Spanish. But yeah, what's wrong with that?
And there are silos in or near where I lived in Bordeaux, of course, where there are just loads and loads of English people. And in parts of Spain, of course, loads of different parts of Spain where they don't learn Spanish and don't have to learn Spanish. And they don't. And the Spanish don't like it. And it's not good for Spanish culture.
What's funny is the very middle class people who would say, oh, but you can't force these Muslims to not wear their hijabs and not eat their... It's all culturally enriching. Would then look at people in Benidorm who don't, who aren't on the sangria and tapas and speaking perfect Spanish as like scum of the earth. Yep. How dare you go there and want to drink lager and eat fish and chips, you scumbags? And it's like, exactly. All right, okay.
That's the problem. Look, I've got one more question for you, but where can people follow you? Maybe see that documentary. Where do you want to send some people?
Okay, so the documentary is under the auspices of the New Culture Forum, who are very worth following on YouTube anyway, because they produce amazing content. And Peter Whittle, the head of the New Culture Forum, such a hardworking, brilliant man who's been a vanguard for a lot of these discussions. He's been doing it for a long time. So you'll find the documentary that I've made for them there. Otherwise, I have a Substack called That's What She Said, and it's at thatalexwoman.com. Okay. And I just there's a diversity of stuff on there. It's all sorts of different bits of news and analysis and videos. And then at That Alex Woman is my handle on everything else.
Okay.
TikTok, X, Instagram.
We will send people there. We'll put all the links in the description. Yeah. Tell me, who's a heretic you admire?
Oh, God, I've put me on the spot. Do you know, I'm going to go Peter Whittle then, as I've just mentioned him. And Peter Whittle does not get the plaudits that man deserves. He's a proper little champion. Incredibly brave, incredibly intelligent.
Yeah, not that little, Peter Whittle.
He's tiny.
Is he?
He's a little pocket creature. He's
remember.
Lovely.
Well, it didn't stand out to me that he was of diminutive stature.
Very, very sort of petite and elegant.
Compared to me, everyone is. Both petite and elegant, I suppose.
When he does a brilliant sort of pursed lips. He's got lovely lips, Peter Whittle. Yeah, he does.
People, please go and follow That Alex Woman and see that documentary I was talking about, the New Culture Forum. That's Peter Whittle with the lovely lips. Hit the like button. Keep watching this channel.